The fall of the alien queen. The sky was burning. The capital of the Zarion Empire shook under the fire of enemy warships. Explosions painted the night with red light. Towers that had stood for centuries collapsed into dust. The air was filled with smoke, screams, and the endless thunder of battle. Inside the royal palace, a young queen ran through broken marble halls. She was only 20 years old, crowned too early and now hunted too soon. Her golden crown was cracked, her long silver robe was torn, and her steps were heavy with fear and exhaustion. Behind her the walls trembled as enemy soldiers forced their way inside. The queen had been raised to believe she was untouchable. Her people bowed to her. Her council spoke of her wisdom, and her armies promised protection. But tonight every promise had shattered. Her guards had fallen one after another. The last of them had died covering her escape. Their voices still rang in her ears, begging her to survive. Her heart raced as she reached the gates. The great doors were broken and burning. The courtyard outside was littered with the fallen. She stumbled and fell to her knees. Her strength was gone. She pressed her hand against the ground and saw her fingers stained red. Shadows moved across the flames. Enemy soldiers stepped forward with weapons raised. Their armor reflected the fire. Their voices mocked her weakness. One of them laughed and shouted that the age of the queen was over. Another raised his blade and she closed her eyes, certain this was the end. But then a figure appeared through the dust. Tall, scarred, wearing battered human armor. He was not one of her people, not a royal guard, not an assassin. He was a human. His weapon was old and scratched, his helmet dented, but his eyes burned with fire. The soldiers laughed at him. They mocked his size, they called him prey, they called him weak. One shouted that humans were only fit to serve. But the human did not laugh. He did not answer. He simply raised his weapon and stepped forward. The queen opened her eyes, confusion filled her heart. Why would a human be here? Why would he face certain death? Yet the human's stance was steady, his gaze unshaken. And when the first soldier charged, the human moved like a storm. The clash of steel echoed. The human struck with fury. His blows were heavy, each swing filled with power. The alien soldier fell before he even understood. Another rushed in, but the human was faster. He dodged, he struck, he broke them down one by one. The queen gasped as she watched. He was only one man, but he fought like an army. His shouts filled the ruins. His blade cut through the darkness, and the ground was stained with the blood of those who mocked him. Within moments the courtyard was silent except for the crackle of fire. The human stood in the middle of the fallen, his chest rising and falling, his armor cracked and smoking. Dirt and blood covered his face, yet his eyes still burned bright. He turned and looked at the queen. She flinched, expecting arrogance or cruelty. But instead she saw calm. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "Get up," he said, and held out his hand. The queen trembled. She had been taught since childhood to never trust humans, to see them as reckless and dangerous. But now, when all others had betrayed her, when her own council had abandoned her, a human was the only one standing between her and death. Her hand shook as she reached out. Their fingers touched. His grip was strong and warm. He pulled her to her feet with ease. She stumbled but did not fall because he did not let go. For the first time in her life, she felt safe not because of her crown, not because of her empire, but because of a single human who had chosen to fight for her. Her golden eyes widened as she realized the truth. This night would not only decide her fate, it would decide the fate of the galaxy, for the human had saved her, and she could already feel the weight of gratitude pressing deep into her heart. Behind them the capital burned. Towers collapsed into fire. The screams of her people echoed. The night sky split with the roar of enemy fleets, but standing beside the human, she no longer felt helpless. She felt something new, something she had never known. Hope, and that hope she knew had the face of humanity. The human's defiance, the queen's legs trembled as she stood. Her crown slipped slightly to the side, but the human's steady grip kept her upright. Her golden eyes stared at him, searching for answers. Why would a stranger fight for her? Why would a human risk death for someone who had been taught to despise his kind? There was no time for questions. More enemy soldiers were pouring into the courtyard. Their armored boots struck the stone with heavy rhythm. Their war cries echoed like thunder. The queen gasped and stepped back. But the human did not move. Instead, he stepped forward, placing himself between her and the attackers. The enemy commander shouted orders, laughing at the sight of one wounded man facing dozens. "Crush the human," he barked. "Show the queen what weakness really looks like." The soldiers surged forward, confident in their strength, but the human did not back down. His eyes narrowed, his breath deepened, and with a roar he charged into them. The clash was brutal. The human fought with every ounce of strength. His weapon cut through armor. His fists broke bones. His boots crushed the ground beneath him. He moved with reckless courage, but also with skill. Every strike was placed with purpose. Every step carried the weight of defiance. The queen's heart pounded as she watched. She had seen her generals fight. She had seen entire battalions march. But she had never seen this. One man standing like a wall, refusing to fall no matter how many came. The soldiers grew frustrated. Their numbers meant nothing. Their training failed. Their weapons clashed but could not break him. He shouted as he fought, not words of fear but words of fury. His voice rang like a war drum, shaking even the queen's spirit. Blood sprayed across the broken stones. Bodies fell at his feet, yet still he stood. His armor cracked further, his arm bled, but he did not yield. The commander roared in anger and entered the fight himself, a towering alien with jagged armor and a blade that gleamed in the fire. The queen cried out in fear. She had seen that commander slay 10 warriors in single combat, but the human did not flinch. He raised his weapon, meeting the alien head-on. Their blades clashed, sparks filled the air. Each strike shook the courtyard. Each blow echoed like thunder. The commander sneered, mocking him with every swing. "You are nothing but prey, human," he spat. "You cannot win against the Empire." But the human answered with steel. Not words, his blade cut through the commander's guard, slashing deep into his side. The commander staggered, rage twisting his face. But before he could strike again, the human drove his weapon forward, piercing the alien's chest. The commander's roar turned into a choking gasp. His massive body collapsed with a crash that silenced the battlefield. The soldiers froze, their leader lay broken at the human's feet. The firelight reflected off his armor. His face smeared with blood, yet his eyes burned brighter than ever. The human raised his weapon high, and the enemy soldiers stepped back in fear. The queen's breath caught. She could not believe what she saw. For years the galaxy had whispered of human defiance, of Death World survivors who would rather die than surrender. But now she saw it with her own eyes, and it was more terrifying, more powerful than she had ever imagined. The human turned, his chest heaving, his voice rough but steady. "We have to move," he said, pointing toward the broken gate. "They will return with more." The queen hesitated, her heart torn between terror and awe. She nodded and followed him, stumbling through the ruins as he guided her with firm steps, his back always toward danger, his body always shielding her from the shadows. As they fled into the burning night, the queen's thoughts burned as bright as the fires around her. Her empire had betrayed her. Her people had abandoned her, but a single human, a man she had been taught to mock, was the only one who stood unbroken. And in her heart, she began to wonder if the galaxy had been wrong about Hum. The queen's realization. The ruins of the palace faded behind them. The queen stumbled as the human guided her through dark alleys and broken streets. The city that once shone with golden towers was now nothing but ash and smoke. Flames lit the sky, and the cries of her people echoed in every direction. The human moved with steady focus, his weapon ready, his eyes scanning every shadow. He never let her fall behind. Each time she faltered, he pulled her forward, his strength carrying her when hers had failed. They reached the edge of the city where broken walls gave way to jagged cliffs. Below them stretched a valley of stone and darkness. The human pointed toward a narrow path leading into caves carved by time and storms. "We hide there," he said in his rough voice. "They will search, but they won't find us if we move fast." The queen hesitated, her chest rising and falling. She had never known such places. She was raised in palaces, never in caverns, never among shadows, yet she had no choice. She followed him down the path, her silver robe dragging across stone, her crown slipping further until she pulled it from her head and let it fall into the dirt. Inside the caves, the air was cold and heavy. Dripping water echoed like whispers. The queen pressed her back to the stone, her body trembling. The human sat near the entrance, his weapon across his knees, his chest rising and falling slowly as he watched the world outside. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant thunder of warships above the city. Finally the queen spoke, her voice low. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you save me? You are human. My people say your kind are reckless, violent, dangerous. They call you unworthy of trust. Yet you fought for me when my own guard abandoned me." The human did not look at her. His eyes remained on the cave entrance. His voice was calm. "Because it was right," he said simply. "No one deserves to die alone in the dirt. Not even a queen." The queen's breath caught. She stared at him. His words were not spoken with flattery or duty. They carried no weight of politics or power. They were simple, but they struck deeper than any speech of her counsel. For the first time she studied him, his armor cracked, his arms bruised, blood dried across his skin, his face lined with scars that spoke of battles long past. Yet there was no arrogance, no pride, only a quiet fire that refused to die. Her heart trembled. She thought of her council, men who had bowed with words of loyalty, yet fled at the first sign of danger, her generals who promised strength but surrendered the city, her own people who turned their eyes away as the palace burned. And then she thought of this one human, a stranger who had nothing to gain, yet risked everything to protect her. The queen lowered her gaze, shame filling her chest. "All my life I was told humans are weak," she whispered. "But I see now it was a lie. You fight with more strength than armies, and more honor than my council. Tell me, human, why are your kind so different?" The human finally turned, his eyes meeting hers, his voice low but unshaken. "Because we come from a world that tries to kill us every day. Our storms tear cities apart, our beasts hunt us. Our land burns and freezes. We learned to fight not because we wanted to, but because we had to. That is why we do not surrender. Not to our world, not to your assassins, not to anyone." The queen's eyes widened, her breath stilled. She finally understood what the galaxy had whispered in fear. Why humans were called Deathworlders. They were not strong because of weapons or numbers. They were strong because survival was written in their very blood. She looked at him again, her voice softer now. "You should not be here, yet you stand. You should have left me. Yet you stayed. I do not understand, but I will not forget." The human gave no reply. He only turned back to the cave mouth, watching the flames of her city in the distance. But the queen sat in silence, her mind racing, her heart shifting, and in that moment she realized a truth that would change everything. She no longer saw him as a stranger, no longer as a human outsider. She saw him as the one who carried her survival in his hands, and she knew that without him, her throne, her empire, her very life would already be gone. And for the first time in her young reign, the alien queen bowed her head, not to her council, not to her gods, but to a single human warrior, hidden in the shadows of a broken world, Anity all along. Escape through fire. The caves gave them shelter, but not safety. The human knew it, the queen felt it. Outside, the flames of the city glowed like a beacon in the night sky. Enemy ships circled above, their lights sweeping across the ground, searching for survivors, hunting for her. The human crouched near the entrance, his eyes sharp, his ears tuned to every sound. When the distant echo of boots reached the cave walls, he stood at once. "They are coming," he said, his voice steady. "We cannot stay." The queen's chest tightened, her body weak from exhaustion, but when he pulled her to her feet, she followed without protest. His grip was firm, his steps confident, and she found herself trusting him even in the darkness. They slipped through the narrow tunnels, their shadows stretching long against the stone. The sound of water dripped around them. The air grew colder, but the human never slowed. He led her deeper until another opening appeared, one that spilled faint light across the cavern floor. When they emerged, the queen froze. The valley ahead was ablaze, forests burned. The wind carried smoke and ash. The night sky roared with thunder as warships descended. Beams of fire struck the earth, turning it into rivers of flame. The queen's voice broke. "There is no way through," she whispered, her eyes wide with despair. But the human shook his head, his gaze unyielding. "There is always a way," he said, and began moving. Enemy patrols swarmed the valley. Armored soldiers scanned the ruins. Drones hovered in the air. The human led her from shadow to shadow, crouching low, his movements precise, his instincts sharp. Every time she thought they would be seen, he pulled her into cover. Every time her breath caught in fear, his hand steadied her. They crept along a ridge when a drone suddenly turned, its red eye flashing across the rocks. The queen gasped, but the human moved faster. He hurled a broken stone with perfect aim. The drone sparked and fell, crashing into fire below. The noise drew attention, shouts erupted. Soldiers rushed toward them. The human grabbed the queen's hand and pulled her into a sprint. They raced across the ridge, fire lighting their path. Arrows of energy struck the ground around them. Stone shattered. Sparks flew. The queen stumbled, but the human caught her, lifting her onto his shoulder as if she weighed nothing. He charged forward, his steps pounding against the earth, his eyes locked on a ruined tower ahead. "There," he shouted. "We can lose them inside." They burst through the broken archway just as a beam of fire struck the wall behind them. The blast threw them forward, dust and smoke filled the air. The queen coughed as the human set her down gently, his own chest rising with heavy breaths, yet his grip on his weapon never wavered. Inside the ruins, silence wrapped around them. But the queen knew it would not last. Already the echo of boots and metallic voices drew closer. She pressed her back to the wall, fear in her eyes. But when she looked at the human, she saw no fear, only determination. "Why do you not run?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why risk your life for me, when even my own people would not?" The human turned his head, his face lit by the glow of fire through broken stone. His eyes burned like embers. "Because you are still alive," he answered. "And as long as you live, your people still have a chance. Your throne still has meaning. Your enemies want you erased. I will not let that happen." The queen's throat tightened. Her heart ached. She realized then that this man was not only saving her life, he was saving her empire, not for power, not for reward, but because it was right. The walls shook again as another blast struck nearby. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The human stepped forward, weapon ready, his voice steady. "Stay behind me," he said. "We will carve a path through fire if we must." And for the first time since the night began, the queen did not feel like prey. She felt like someone worth saving, not because of her crown, but because one human believed she was. Together they stepped out into the burning valley once more, shadows of soldiers closing in, flames rising high, and as the human raised his weapon, the queen felt her fear fade into something new, something stronger. She felt faith, humanity's hidden strength. The valley roared with fire. Beams of energy split the night. The young queen pressed close to the ruined wall, her breath sharp, her eyes wide. Enemy soldiers spread out in every direction. Their shouts echoed as they searched for her. The human stood in front of her, his weapon ready, his armor cracked and bleeding with heat, yet his stance did not break. The queen felt a strange calm in his presence, as if his will alone could shield her from death. But even she knew one man could not fight an army forever. The thought burned in her mind, despair creeping in. She whispered, "We cannot win," her voice shaking. "They will crush us." The human turned his head slightly, his face dark with soot, his eyes like burning steel. "Not tonight," he said, his voice low and steady. "Not while I stand." The soldiers surged forward. Weapons raised, beams of light tore through the ruins. The human pushed the queen behind him and charged into the storm. His roar shook the flames. His strike sent enemies crashing into the ground. He fought with fury beyond reason, but still more came, wave after wave. The queen's heart screamed as she watched. His strength was unshaken, but his body was bleeding. His arms heavy, the enemy pressed harder, surrounding them, closing in, and then the sky itself shifted. From the clouds above, a new roar thundered, deeper, heavier, the kind that made even alien soldiers freeze. Beams of blue light cut through the smoke, striking enemy ships with deadly precision. The queen gasped as massive shadows moved above the fire. Not enemy craft, but something else, something human. Warships, sleek, black, and bristling with power. They descended from the darkness like hunters. Their cannons lit the night, tearing enemy fleets apart. The ground shook as explosions rippled across the valley. The alien soldiers faltered. Their voices turned to screams of panic. The queen's breath caught. Her body trembling, she whispered, This cannot be." She had been told humans were scattered, broken, without fleets, without empires, yet before her eyes, ships of human design rained fire upon the invaders. Not small craft, but warships built for war. The human did not pause. He struck down the last soldier before him, his chest heaving, his weapon dripping with smoke. Then he looked up at the burning sky. A faint smile tugged at his blood-stained lips. The queen turned to him in shock. "You," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You are not alone, your people." They hid this. Why? Why would the galaxy never see this? The human wiped the blood from his face with the back of his hand, his voice calm. "Because the galaxy laughed at us. Because they mocked us, because they believed we were weak. So we built in silence, we fought in shadows. And when the day came, we were ready." The queen stared at him, her heart pounding with awe. The sky lit with fire as human warships crushed enemy fleets above. The ground shook as soldiers fled in terror. All around her the empire she thought unshakable burned, yet the human who saved her stood unbroken. And behind him the truth of humanity revealed itself at last. She whispered again, her voice trembling with wonder. "Deathworlders." The word slipped from her lips. Once spoken in fear, now spoken in reverence. The human looked at her, his eyes steady, his voice low but fierce. Now you understand. Above them the human fleet roared, the night sky torn apart by their fire, and the Queen felt her world shift forever. For in one night, everything she had been taught about humans had turned to dust, faith in him and faith in humanity. The Queen's gratitude, the battlefield fell silent at last. The screams of enemy soldiers faded into the night. Above them, the human fleet hovered like giants in the sky, their guns still glowing, their presence heavy with power. The galaxy had long believed humans to be scattered survivors, but tonight their hidden strength had torn that lie apart. The young Queen stood among the ruins, her silver robe burned, her crown gone. Ash covered her face, her body trembled with exhaustion, yet her golden eyes shone bright. For she had seen something no ruler in her empire had ever witnessed. A single human stand against an army, and behind him a fleet that could humble worlds. The human walked toward her, his steps slow, his armor cracked, blood marking every line of his body. Yet he stood tall, his weapon lowered at last, his face calm even in the storm's aftermath. He looked not like a conqueror, not like a soldier hungry for glory, but like a man who had simply done what was right. The Queen's heart ached as she looked at him. She thought of the council who betrayed her, the generals who fled, the armies who surrendered, and then she thought of this one man, a stranger from a mocked world, who had saved her throne with his hands, who had risked his life when hers meant nothing to him. Her legs shook as she stepped forward. The ruins cracked beneath her feet, and then, to the shock of her guards who had begun to return, she knelt, her head bowed low before the human. Gasps echoed across the broken city. Alien voices trembled in disbelief. The Empress of the Zarian Empire, ruler of millions, bowed not to her council, not to her gods, but to a human. Her voice carried through the silence, soft yet steady. You saved me when my people abandoned me. You fought when others fled. You carried me when I could not walk. Tonight I live because of you, and for that I owe you more than my crown. I owe you my gratitude and my loyalty. The human froze, his scarred face unreadable. He had fought monsters, faced fleets, endured storms, yet in this moment he looked uncertain, as if her kneeling was heavier than any battle he had fought. The Queen raised her head, her golden eyes meeting his, glowing with fire and truth. Let the galaxy see this, she said, her voice ringing with power. The Zarian Queen kneels to humanity, and I will never rise against them. Instead, I will stand with them, for tonight proved that humans are not weak. They are the strongest of us all. The returning soldiers looked on in silence, their weapons lowered. Whispers rippled through the ranks. Already the tale was spreading, carried in every voice, carried in every gaze. Soon it would travel across stars. The human shook his head slowly, his voice quiet. I did not fight for your throne, he said. I fought because no one deserves to be left behind. But the Queen only smiled faintly, her head still bowed. And that, she whispered, is why your people will rise and why I will stand beside you. Above them the human fleet shifted, their shadows stretching long across the city, and the Queen, still kneeling before the warrior who had saved her life, knew the galaxy would never be the same. The legacy of the rescue, the fires of the capital burned for days. The towers that once touched the clouds were now blackened ruins. The palace lay broken, yet among the ashes a story began to spread, a story that would outlive the flames. It was told first in whispers by the survivors who had seen it. The night when the alien Queen knelt before a human, the night when the weakest race in the galaxy revealed strength no empire could deny. The Queen was carried back to her people under the watch of human warships, the same fleets the galaxy had long mocked as myths. When she stood before her council again, she did not rise in anger. She did not speak of revenge. Instead, she told the truth. She told them that humanity had saved her life, that without them her throne would already belong to traitors. The council scoffed at first, their voices sharp, their pride unbroken, but then the sky shook once more, for the human fleet remained above, silent but watching, its power undeniable, its presence heavier than any words. The Queen raised her head, her voice steady. The galaxy will no longer laugh at them, she declared. They saved your Queen, they saved your empire. They will no longer be treated as prey, but as equals, as allies, or as your rulers if you refuse. Her words spread beyond her halls, carried by every witness, carried by every soldier who had seen her bow before the human warrior. Soon the galaxy itself began to tremble. Empires whispered in fear. Merchants spoke in awe, and rulers wondered what else humanity had hidden in the dark. The human himself did not stay for praise. When the city began to rebuild, he left quietly, his scars still fresh, his weapons still blood-stained. He walked as if the war had not ended, as if battle still waited for him beyond the horizon. But the queen never forgot. Her heart carried the weight of gratitude. Each time she stood before her people, she remembered his hand pulling her to her feet. Each time she wore her crown, she remembered the moment she dropped it into the dirt. Each time she looked into the stars, she wondered where he had gone. Songs began to rise across the empire. Stories told of the lone human who defied death, who faced an army, who fought until the sky itself answered. Children spoke his name with wonder. Soldiers whispered it with respect. Rulers feared it. And in every corner of the galaxy the legend grew. And though the queen ruled for many years, though her empire would rise again from ash, her most remembered act was not a victory in war, not a treaty signed, not a conquest won, but the moment she knelt before a single human and declared her loyalty. That image, burned into the memory of a galaxy, could never be erased, and so it was said in every star and on every world, that the night the young alien queen bowed before a human was the night the galaxy learned the truth. That humanity was never weak, never broken, never prey. They were the fire hidden in the dark, and once seen, the galaxy could never forget.